Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. At UFC 282, Paddy Pimblett won a controversial unanimous decision over Jared Gordon, and I've gone back and rewatched the fight, and I'm going to answer the question whether or not it was a robbery. We're also going to talk about the main event decision a little bit, but not too much. I've done an entire live stream post-fight immediately following the fights, about an hour and 15 minutes. I will link that down in the description if you want to hear my thoughts on basically every fight on the card. But we're also going to talk about the integrity of the sport, because there's been a small minority of people who have been screaming from the rooftops for years that the UFC's fixing fights and that the judges' scorecards are tainted. And now with the James Krause, Derek Minner situation, where we have the insider betting, potential fixed fights investigation going on, and now we have this really controversial scorecard. I wanted to talk about it a little bit because I've never really talked about it up until last night on my live watch along for the Paddy Pimblett Jared Gordon co-main event. But we're also going to assess Paddy Pimblett's skills. We're going to talk about what may be next for Paddy Pimblett, and also how does Paddy Pimblett match up with a top 15 of the lightweight division. So first off, round by round, Jared Gordon, Paddy Pimblett. Going into this fight, I thought Paddy Pimblett was going to be too big, too strong. I didn't think he was particularly good, but Jared Gordon, I thought, he's kind of bottom of the barrel in the UFC. I know a lot of people like to say, oh, he's fought this guy and fought that guy. When he's fought these high-level guys, or guys who eventually went on to become high-level, he got absolutely starched by them. And I thought Jared Gordon barely belongs at lightweight. He's an undersized lightweight, and I thought Paddy Pimblett would go out there and be able to bully him and get the win. And that's not what happened. And if you go back, I did a live stream watch-along for this fight. My initial reaction to the judges' scorecards is I was absolutely shocked. You can go back and watch it. The video will be linked down in the description. I believe there's somebody commented a timestamp if you want to go check out my reaction. But I could not fathom that the judges would give the decision to Paddy Pimblett. And not only that, a unanimous decision. There was not one of the three judges that gave the fight to Jared Gordon. And I was utterly shocked. But I wanted to go back and rewatch it. You're watching it live. You're doing a live stream. I wanted to go back and rewatch it. Is there a chance? Maybe, just maybe, there is, a way to give this fight to Paddy Pimblett. Some of these fights are closer than you think when you go back and rewatch them. So that was my initial reaction. When I went back and rewatched the fight, you had round one where Jared Gordon smashed Paddy Pimblett probably 5 to 10 times with nasty left hooks. He landed a big right hand that borderline rocked Paddy. I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but he stung Paddy badly with a huge right hand. A lot of Paddy's combinations were hitting the arms of Jared Gordon in this first round. There were some good leg kicks from both guys. There was an instance, I don't know if you want to call it a takedown from Jared Gordon or not, but Paddy Pimblett kind of initiated a clinch, kind of looking like he was looking for a takedown, got reversed, ended up on the bottom. I don't know if you want to call that a takedown for Jared Gordon or not. I would consider it a takedown. And then he threw a couple shots, and he closed out the round, I think 20 or 30 seconds on top of Paddy Pimblett. Round one, I thought, was a clear 10-9 for Jared Gordon. When I watched it live and rewatching it, I thought it was a clear 10-9. He landed the better shots. He landed more shots. And he had a takedown, and he had control for about 30 seconds. I think round one is unequivocally Jared Gordon, and I think any other assessment of round one is completely delusional. So then you move on to round two. Round two, I think, is the most controversial round of the entire fight. This round was pretty competitive. You had Paddy landing some body kicks. You had a takedown from Jared Gordon. Paddy Pimblett worked his way back to the feet. Jared Gordon landed some shots in the clinch. Paddy landed some shots in the clinch. And when I look back at this round, it was closer than I thought when I watched live. It was very competitive. It was a close round. But I thought Jared Gordon landed more shots, landed the better shots, had clinch control, had a takedown. I thought round two, if somebody scored round two for Paddy Pimblett, I wouldn't think they were crazy. But I think what it comes down to, and I like to call this the Josh Emmett, Calvin Kattar effect. Sometimes when a fighter is being active, but a lot of those strikes are not landing, they landing on the arms of the opponent, sometimes people score those rounds for that fighter. You look back at round two, Paddy Pimblett had some flurries in this round, but a lot of them were just the strikes bouncing off the forearms of Jared Gordon. So I gave round two to Jared Gordon. But I could entertain an argument of giving that round a 10-9 to Paddy Pimblett, but I think it's a 10-9 Jarrett Gordon. Then you go on to the third round, which we're going to talk about Paddy Pimblett's actions after the fight, as well as some of Dana White's comments after the fight. Round 3, basically Jarrett Gordon pushed Paddy Pimblett up against the fence, controlled him against the fence, not landed a whole lot of damage, knees to the thighs. At one point, Paddy Pimblett got off the fence, and then Jarrett Gordon ended up grabbing him like 10 seconds later, pushing him back against the fence, getting a takedown. I think he got 2 takedowns in this round. Didn't do a whole lot of damage, but landed some shots in the clinch. I think he landed a couple shots on the ground. And then the last 30 seconds of the round, he took Paddy Pimblett down, got his back, but was too high. Paddy Pimblett shook him off. Then there was a scramble. Jarrett Gordon ended up against the fence. Paddy Pimblett had his back with a body lock, but it was only the last 30 seconds or so of the round. This round was uneventful. Not a lot of damage done by both guys. Maybe you could say equal strikes landed for both guys, but Jarrett Gordon controlled him for the majority of this round. I think there was probably 4 minutes of control time for Jarrett Gordon in this round. And one thing I wanted to note about Herb Dean, I noticed it when I watched it live, but when I watched it a second time, it was particularly egregious. Jarrett Gordon was holding Paddy Pimblett up against the fence, looking for takedowns, knee into the thigh. And there was one moment where it lasted, or not one moment, but it lasted at one point for about 2 minutes. And Jarrett Gordon was just on the fringe of Herb Dean separating them. But then Paddy Pimblett worked his way out of the clinch. Now, that whole entire instance is now forgotten. They're back to the center of the cage. Jarrett Gordon grabs the clinch again. 4 seconds after he grabs the second clinch exchange, Herb Dean's like, let's work. Let's work. They've been in the clinch for 4 seconds. He was basically holding that first clinch exchange against Jarrett Gordon. Terrible reffing. Herb Dean used to be the best in the business. Now I think he's horrible. But that's besides the point. When you get controlled for 4 minutes in a round and you do virtually no damage in a round, not that Jarrett Gordon did a whole lot. He landed some shots in the clinch. But not a whole lot of damage, so I'll just say it's even. You lose that round. That is a 10-9 round for Jarrett Gordon. So at the worst case scenario, I have this fight at a 29-28 for Jarrett Gordon. And a lot of people are saying, oh, all the rounds were close. I don't believe round 1 was close, and I don't believe round 3 was close. I thought Jarrett Gordon clearly won those rounds. And I think what is going on here also is a lot of people are so shocked by the main event result, Jan Blachowicz, Magomed Ankalaev, that it was a split draw. And it's kind of whitewashing the co-main event. The attention should be on the co-main event because the main event judging, and I talked about this in my full post-fight, it wasn't horrific. You could give the first 3 rounds to Jan Blachowicz, and you could give the last 2 rounds to Ankalaev, and you could give round 5 to Ankalaev, a 10-8 round, therefore making it a draw. So I don't think that decision's horrible. The co-main event, Paddy Pimblett versus Jarrett Gordon, was unjustifiable. And then when you look at the scorecards, it gets even worse. You have Doug Crosby, who gave rounds 1 and 2 to Paddy Pimblett. How can you, I can't even fathom how you could watch that first round and give it to Paddy Pimblett. That is straight up delusional. Doug Crosby needs to be thrown in jail. I don't know how you can come up with that scorecard. There is no way Jarrett Gordon lost round 1. Then you have Chris Lee, who's notoriously for bad decisions as well. He actually gave Jarrett Gordon round 1, so at least he was correct on that. But he gave round 2 and 3 to Paddy Pimblett. How do you give round 3 to Paddy Pimblett? I can't even fathom. And then you have Ron McCarthy, who also gave Paddy Pimblett rounds 1 and 2. I don't understand it. How is it possible to give Paddy Pimblett round 1? Jarrett Gordon was smashing him with left hooks. He landed a nasty right hand. He landed some good leg kicks. I can't even fathom what is going through Ron McCarthy and Doug Crosby's mind to literally give round 1 to Paddy Pimblett. And this is where I really think the integrity of the sport is taking a hit. You have the James Krause, Derek Minner situation where there is some talk that Derek Minner went in there injured and intentionally threw the fight. James Krause, a betting man, tipped off people. There was a lot of betting coming in on Derek Minner's opponent going into the fight. I have an entire video on it. You can find it on my channel. And now you have this. And we've had controversial decisions for years, but I believe this is one of the worst decisions I've seen in the last 10 years. And there is a lot of people who I feel like are apologists for the judges. There's people that going out there and saying, oh, well, this round was close and that round was close. And, I could kind of see this and just, bending reality to try to say, okay, well, this decision wasn't too bad. Let me just say this. If the roles were reversed, if Paddy Pimblett put on the performance that Jarrett Gordon did, and Jarrett Gordon put on the performance Paddy Pimblett did, and the decision went to Jarrett Gordon, could you imagine the outrage? And this decision, for the first time in my entire life as an MMA fan, has me questioning, are these judges being paid off? I used to think, okay, these people are conspiracy theories, and I don't think this is going on some grand scale. I don't think Dana White's going over to the judges and saying, look, I'm going to give you a $50K bonus. Make sure you give this round to Paddy Pimblett. But I do think there could be some type of backroom deals with these judges, or these judges just could be like, you know what? Well, this guy's kind of a star. He's popular. I like him. I'm going to give him the rounds, because I feel like this is way past just bad judging. I feel like, an 80-year-old non-fan of the sport could watch Paddy Pimblett, Jarrett Gordon, and say, okay, Jarrett Gordon clearly won. So I'm really starting to question the integrity of the sport. I don't feel like there's ever been a point in MMA, in the UFC's history, at least since I've been watching, where the trust of the integrity of the outcomes of fights are as low as it is right now. So I don't know. We'll have to see what goes on in the future, but I truly believe there needs to be some type of investigation. These judges are able to provide these god-awful scorecards, and then there's no accountability. They need to explain this. We need answers. And us as fans, it's ruining nights. I mean, we're watching this for entertainment, and now, okay, are these predetermined outcomes? Is that what's going on here? Because if so, I don't want to watch it, I need to change my name to WWE Joey, because that's essentially what we're watching here. This is disturbing. And then you have Paddy Pimblett, and I wanted to talk about this before we get into the assessment of his skill set. You have Paddy Pimblett coming out and saying in the post-fight interview, which he wasn't paid for, by the way, from Joe Rogan, it wasn't close. Yeah, well, Paddy, you're actually right. I know you got a lot of criticism for that, but you are right. It was not close. Jarrett Gordon clearly won rounds 1 and 3, and I thought he won round 2 too, but that's kind of debatable. It was not a close fight. It was a competitive fight. It was not a close fight. A lot of people mix those things up, and I just think it is completely ridiculous that Paddy Pimblett not only went out there and said it wasn't close, he was saying he clearly won. And then he went on to say, oh, I knew I won rounds 1 and 2, so I coasted in the third. And then Dana White goes out and says, you know what? I'm going to criticize Jarrett Gordon for his terrible game plan in the third because he coasted. Meanwhile, Paddy Pimblett went out there and admitted to coasting. That is ridiculous. Paddy Pimblett is the biggest loser of this week. Honestly, he got 10-8 by Ariel Helwani. He got 30-27 by Jarrett Gordon. And, now he's coming out and he's saying these outright delusional things. He got controlled for almost 7 minutes in this fight, and he got outstruck. And I'm not going to use the stats because I don't believe in those stats. I believe what my eyes are telling me. And the stats, I'm never going to use them to prove my argument, and I'm never going to take them into account to disprove what I'm saying either. The stats are bullshit. I don't know who's making those stats. Half the time they seem way off to what we're actually watching. But to my eyes, he clearly got outstruck. Jarrett Gordon clearly did more damage, and Jarrett Gordon had more control time. This was a brutal robbery, and I think we need answers. I think we need an investigation. I cannot believe, I could not even fathom going to the scorecards a situation where Paddy Pimblett were to get the win. I think it's completely delusional. And the fact that 2 judges gave round 1 to Paddy Pimblett is completely ridiculous. As far as his assessment for his skills, I have always told you guys, Paddy Pimblett, he has an interesting accent. He's a fun personality. He's got an interesting haircut, but he's not that good. I said, he could improve. He's still young, but he's not 20 years old. He's almost 30 years old. And going in there against Jarrett Gordon, who, no disrespect to Jarrett Gordon, he's a well-rounded fighter, getting close to his 40s. I think he's like 35 right now. I know that's mid-30s, but you get my point. He's getting towards the end of his MMA career in the next few years. And Jarrett Gordon was never the elite of the elite. And he went out there and 30-27 Paddy Pimblett. That is Paddy Pimblett's toughest test to date, is Jarrett Gordon. And I know he technically got a win, but he lost that fight. And when I start thinking about, okay, well, how is Paddy Pimblett going to do against the top 15 in the lightweight division? And keep in mind, There's a lot of killers outside of the top 15. We're going to talk about who I would like to see Paddy Pimblett fight next. But let's take a look at the top 15. At number 15, you have washed up Tony Ferguson, the dead corpse of Tony Ferguson. Looked awful in his last fight against Nate Diaz, but he did take it on like 3 weeks notice, and then he took the Nate Diaz fight in particular on 24 hours notice. Tony Ferguson washes Paddy Pimblett, in my opinion, even though Tony Ferguson is just a dead corpse. Okay, then you have number 14, Conor McGregor. There's been talk of Paddy Pimblett versus Conor McGregor would be this massive UK fight. Conor McGregor, even Conor McGregor after his Dustin Poirier fight at UFC 264. So what I'm implying here is Conor McGregor with his snapped leg absolutely destroys Paddy Pimblett, KOs him in the first round. Then you move up to Renato Moicano. Renato Moicano would wreck Paddy Pimblett. Damir Ismagulov. Oh my God, could you imagine? Paddy Pimblett would get destroyed. Dan Hooker would destroy him. Jalen Turner would destroy him. Arman Sarukian would destroy him. Mateus Gamrot would destroy him. Rafael Dos Anjos would destroy him. Could you imagine a fight against Rafael Dos Anjos? He would destroy him with the grappling, and that's Paddy Pimblett's strong suit. Rafael Fiziev, oh my God, brutal first round KO. Michael Chandler, brutal first round KO. Beneil Dariush would dominate him and destroy him and probably finish him on the ground. Justin Gaethje, brutal first round KO. Dustin Poirier, brutal first round KO. Charles Oliveira would wreck him, probably KO him, maybe submit him on the ground. And Islam Makhachev, could you imagine? And Paddy Pimblett had the audacity to say, I would have done better than Charles Oliveira against Islam Makhachev. No, you wouldn't. You would have gotten ragdolled immediately. Jarrett Gordon, who could probably make the bantamweight 135-pound limit, held you against the fence for 7 minutes and took you down repeatedly. Do you know what Islam Makhachev would do to you? Unreal. So Paddy Pimblett has absolutely no chance against anybody in the top 15. He would get destroyed. So that bears the question, what's next for Paddy Pimblett? What's the UFC going to do with him? I don't know. I honestly think Dana White is meeting up with the matchmakers, and they're thinking, you know what? Can CM Punk get down to the 155-pound limit? Do we think he could get down? Because we need an opponent for Paddy Pimblett. I think that's what they're thinking. Or maybe Mike Jackson. Could we give it to Mike Jackson? Do you think Chris Montino would re-sign and maybe go up to 55, even though he's a flyweight? Because I'm looking through that just outside the top 15 range, and, you know, we're looking at Drew Dober. We're looking at Terrence McKinney. I mean, we're looking at Guram Kutaladze. Would all absolutely wreck Paddy Pimblett. I mean, Terrence McKinney would destroy him badly. And Paddy Pimblett, I mean, you look at the fight against Jarrett Gordon, there's nothing that you can take away from that fight and say, okay, Paddy Pimblett's really good. His striking is mediocre at best. His chin is straight up in the air. His, defensive striking is god-awful. I mean, his hands are always low, and it's not like he has good head movement. He backs straight up. He doesn't move his head, doesn't have great footwork. The only real bright spot in Paddy Pimblett's game is he has some decent kicks, but I mean, that's nothing special. The barrier of entry for the UFC has lowered over the past few years. 4 to 5 years ago, Paddy Pimblett would not even be in the UFC. That's how low level I believe Paddy Pimblett is. The skills just aren't there, okay? He has some okay jiu-jitsu. He has some okay ground game, okay submission game. Dude's getting out-wrestled by Jordan Levitt, who I believe is way too small for 55. Dude's getting out-grappled by Jarrett Gordon, who I believe is too small as well. And you look at some of these other guys. I mean, Paddy Pimblett, how is he going to make the strides to be able to go in there, even against the best case scenario, maybe someone like Renato Moicano? Renato Moicano would destroy him in every facet. He would destroy him in the striking. He would destroy him in the grappling. Paddy Pimblett has absolutely no chance against Renato Moicano. And I don't believe, if he was 20 years old, maybe we could say, okay, maybe one day he can get to that level. I think Paddy Pimblett right now is just a fighter that the UFC wants to milk for every last drop of money they can possibly get. And I think what's going to happen is they're going to see what trash cans they can conjure up to throw in there with Paddy Pimblett, because Dana White, even though he acted after the fight as, oh, well, Jarrett Gordon threw the fight away and you can't leave it in the hands of the judges, Dana White knows what he saw in that fight. He knows Paddy lost. He can assess the skills. He's been watching the sport for a long time. So they're going to try to find some trash cans they can throw in there with Paddy Pimblett. We're probably going to get another like year to 2 years of Paddy Pimblett fighting garbage cans. Then after that, they might give him a step up, maybe a top 15 opponent. Then we're going to see Paddy get brutally KO'd. And then they're going to try to baby him for a couple more fights. And then the same thing's going to happen, rinse and repeat, KO'd by a top 15 opponent. That's what's going to happen. Paddy Pimblett has no future in the lightweight division. He will never be a champion. And unless the UFC somehow worms their way with Paddy Pimblett, I don't see how he can even make the top 10. I really can't fathom him making it to the top 10. Jared Gordon is a low-level UFC fighter. Okay? He's a low-level, getting up there in age UFC fighter. And he 30-27 Paddy Pimblett. Clipped him so many times with that left hook. And you look at the fundamentals of Paddy Pimblett, they're just not there. Chin's high, hands are low, head movement's non-existent, footwork isn't that good, can't stuff a takedown against guys who are much smaller than him, and that's supposed to be Paddy Pimblett's strength. I just don't know how he finds a way to improve to the level of being able to compete with guys like Terrence McKinney, who would destroy him, with guys like Guram Kutaladze, who would destroy him, you know, guys like Joel Alvarez, who would destroy him. All those guys aren't even in the top 15. So I don't know what the UFC does next. They're going to try to find some trash can, maybe making his UFC debut. They're going to sign some guy off the street, make him come in and fight Paddy Pimblett so they can try to get some hype back. But outside of that, I mean, I think this has been a nightmare week for Paddy Pimblett, and I think Jared Gordon was brutally robbed at UFC 282. Let me know what you guys think about all this. Don't forget to comment down below and let me know what you think. Also, like the video, and thank you so much for watching.